Hey, Fidelity. Can I get a second opinion on stocks in the Fidelity app?
With Fidelity, it's easy to get an outside opinion from independent experts in a single score.
And then?
When you're ready, trade U.S. stocks and ETFs with no commissions.
That's right.
I am always right.
Investing involves risk, including risk of loss. Online U.S. equity trades and ETFs and a retail Fidelity account. Sell order assessment fee not included. Some account types and securities excluded. Details at fidelity.com/commissions. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC, member NYSE SIPC.
Hey folks, welcome to another killer episode of Fintech Insider, where we cut through all of the noise and get straight to the people who are actually shaping the future of finance. And today, oh boy, we've got somebody who you really need to know more about. Joining us is Emily Turner, the freshly appointed CEO of HSBC Innovation Banking UK. Yes, you heard that right. She is taking the reins of HSBC's tech banking arm in the UK, a division that is deeply embedded in the UK's innovation ecosystem. She's built a serious track record over the years. Before her role at HSBC, she spent more than a decade at Citi, where she launched Citi Ventures UK, led their global institutional strategic investing group, and played a hands-on role in incubating early-stage companies out of their internal incubator. She's officially stepped into the CEO position in June 2025 after receiving regulatory approval, and she is not just focused on banking. This is about building a community of founders, investors, and tech companies and helping them scale. We're going to be doing a little bit of a deep dive into what this appointment means for HSBC, how Emily thinks about innovation bank model more broadly, and what she sees the biggest opportunities and risks for the UK fintech ecosystem. So strap in. This is going to be one of those conversations that really matter. Let's get into it. Lovely to see you, Emily. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
We were just saying it. I think we've sort of known each other like 12, 13 years on. So it's quite scary. Time flies when you're having fun, obviously.
Yeah, it's definitely more than a decade. I think we've even talked about crypto and stablecoins for nearly that long.
Exactly, yeah. It's always next year, it's going to be huge, isn't it? So we keep coming back to it. But maybe for all of the listeners who haven't known you for 12 or 13 years, let's start at the beginning. Did you always dream of being a banker? Was that like little Emily was like, you know what, when I grow up, I can never imagine people saying that. So what was the dreams when you were little?
Yeah, so I think like so many things, a bit of push and pull and then a ton of luck. So I'm the child of two bankers. My mom actually was one of the first people at her own bank to go less than 5 days a week when she had my sister and then me. And so I obviously had great role models. But I actually wanted to be a doctor. I loved science. I loved math. I loved people. I loved solving problems. And I just thought, medicine is for me. So I had a shadowing program when I was mid-late teenage years and followed a surgeon around. And in my first week, I fainted multiple times. I'm quite sensitive to smells and sounds and lights. And
now you know that, yeah.
And now I know that. So when I say a bit of push and pull, that got me very quickly to, I need a job where I can stay upright as sort of a key priority, and also one where you don't end up with all of your colleagues needing to attend to you versus the job at hand. And because of my parents, I actually have an older sister in banking as well. I always knew that there was an ability to solve problems, to help people. And even early on in my career, I thought, okay, I'm a business doctor. That's what I'm going to be. Because being a human doctor physically wasn't in the cards for me.
Yeah, it's amazing. And the sort of theory versus the reality. I had the sort of grandeur idea of sort of being a physiotherapist if sports didn't work out. Then I realized you had to just touch people. And I was like, I'm not cool with that. So banking, it was a good alternative. But
yeah,
so what was the background then? Did you, obviously you sort of osmosis from your parents is great, but what was the sort of education route you went through?
So I studied sociology undergrad. And really it was about, people, norms, those types of things, and a fair grounding in, I'd say more analytical types of things. And then I found myself in a training program, saw people around me that had great skills that I was, envious of and wanted to emulate. And again, it was just sort of back to that curiosity. I consider myself an optimist by choice, and something that sort of I very, concretely opt into very, very regularly. And then I've always loved strategy. And so I started in banking, found my way to business school. Out of business school, I had planned to go into trading. But between the time that I started business school and I ended business school, the place where I intended to go work no longer existed. This was during the great financial crisis. And so I found my way to McKinsey. Worked mostly with banks and financial institutions there because not a shock coming out of the financial crisis. There was a lot of work to do there. And then found my way to Citi to essentially, look at strategy, business development, those types of things. But, I'd say that curiosity, data-driven approach, and optimism is the thread that goes through everything.
Amazing. Consultancy is such an amazing learning ground as well, isn't it? I say to anybody, if you 6 months in a consultancy is like 6 years in a sort of a client-side business, isn't it? Because you're just exposed to different things and the way in which different clients kind of react to different, occasions. Some people the crisis is a crisis, and other people it's an opportunity, isn't it?
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I think that one of the other things that I brought from consulting is that, at least where I worked, we would use we to talk about us and the client, and it embedded in you a level of empathy and alignment with your clients, and that's also something I carry with me today.
Yeah. But honed those PowerPoint skills as well, right?
My PowerPoint skills, I would say, are strong. My Excel skills, though, remain even stronger.
Very good, very good. And at what point, I guess, in that journey, through that consultancy part, innovation in banking sort of exploded at that point onwards, didn't it? I guess from 2008 to today, it's been a relentless drive of new innovations and new changes, which, I always say it's the best time to be working in banking, isn't it?
Yeah, I think this is an amazing time to be working in banking, both, to your point of sort of what's changing in the world overall, but also the macroeconomic uncertainty, the role that banks can play in helping companies navigate that. And then importantly, when I think about AI, there's a real argument to be had that technical debt is no longer the hindrance that it used to be if there's ways to overcome that much more quickly. So, I think this is a great moment for incumbents and new entrants alike.
Yeah. And I guess through that career, you say your mum and dad worked in financial services. They're pretty decent mentors to have over the dining table as well, right? So, but I guess with anybody else through that, I'm not quite going. Give me 10 shout outs to people who raised you up, but there must have been lots of strong leaders through that process as well to learn from.
Yeah, I think I've been very fortunate that I've learned from so many people. I've had so many mentors, and senior to me, peers of mine, junior to me, I'd like to think I'm someone who learns from everyone. And it's also something that very consciously I try to do. If I want to call out two people who really changed my frame on the art of the possible, one of them is Dean Little. He's the CEO and founder of a company called Proximity. This is a company that we incubated at Citi and then spun out. It reimagines investor communication and proxy voting. And really, Dean had spent over a decade working in that space. And he just knew his clients and their problems better than anyone else. And so that sort of fixation on a problem was something that I learned to spot in other founders over time. The other is someone who likes to avoid the limelight, so I won't use his name, but he'll know who he is, a senior data scientist at Citi. And what he really taught me was, or sort of put into to practice, sort of the two pizza rule. What can you achieve with a tiny team, even in a big organization? And the idea of extraordinarily fast cycle times, getting into production very quickly, all of those types of things. He showed me that the art of the possible was way beyond what I'd initially thought.
Yeah, that's a decent combination of learnings there as well, isn't it? Obsessed with customers' actual problems, not what you think their problem is, and execute quickly and put something in their hands. That's almost the secret to success right there, isn't it?
Yeah, no, exactly. That's why, to me, the two of them together stand out.
Very cool. So I guess when that corporate venture side of your background, that's again, that's one of the most exciting places to work in a bank, right? Because you're there to not just invest but help make successful many businesses around it. You're almost kind of introducing some chaos into the organization of changing technology, the business models, culture. Talk to me a little bit more about that, because that's an exciting journey.
Yeah, no, it was, I sort of fell into that. I became the first employee of Citi Ventures in the UK. And at the time, I was the only employee outside of the US. And so I used to joke that I didn't have a boss until 4 p.m. because my boss was based in California. And so it required a fair bit of just sort of independence, get on with it, those types of things. which was great to learn in that way.
I mean, you say that in a positive way, but having worked for a US business where I was one of the few people, like you're suddenly feeling you're almost offshored, aren't you? Do you know what I mean? You're the turn it around while they're asleep person, which makes you look really efficient, and you're probably a little bit easier because nobody's ringing you, are they, while they're asleep? But still quite hard, right?
It was quite hard, but I think at the same time, there's real power to the ecosystem here. And, London was when I started, a real powerhouse in fintech and financial institution innovation. And so that was a real advantage that I had, which meant that I could spend essentially my mornings and early afternoons out in the ecosystem and then not have to spend as much time sort of on the internal stuff.
Yeah. Obviously not a local London accent that you've got. So how did you end up, did you just put your hand up first to, you're like, yeah, I'll go to London, or...
Yeah. So, like so many people, I wanted to try something new. I'd studied abroad in undergrad. I'd studied in Spain. And I sort of caught the travel bug, I would say. And as the child of two New York-based bankers, I thought, okay, if I'm going to go into banking, let me go forge it sort of my own way, find some place. I don't speak Spanish or other languages at a level to be proficient. So London seemed the obvious place. So roughly 2 years out of uni, I moved to London and I haven't looked back. Nice.
And you've got used to all of the weird sort of hang-ups of working in Britain, like you got your pronunciations down, and it's aluminium, right?
I'm not sure about that one. And I'm pretty confident that my team will continue to helpfully correct me in some of those places, but yes.
Good. Well, as long as they're helping, that's good. Yeah. Obviously, that sort of corporate investor, that change there, I mean, it's an interesting intersection, isn't it, in big organizations between, building things and making it happen, customer problems, like you said, literal investing in those. That triangulation is quite an interesting space to work in. And the sort of, did you find the sort of red thread from strategy all the way down to making it happen for customers a fun one to live in? Because it's the closest in a big company that you get to, the scary world of startups, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's been a number of points in my career when I've, asked myself, am I best suited to a big company working with startups or working at a startup that works with big companies? And actually, I took a sabbatical in 2019 and spent a lot of time in one of the Citi Ventures then portfolio companies, essentially as their intern, doing whatever they needed and, sort of debating that. But I think, for me, if you work in a big company and you work in this space, you can see real impact of what you do. Not necessarily, 1 hour to the next or one day to the next, but if you look 1 year versus the next, you can see extraordinary change as a result of what you do. And I find that very rewarding.
Yeah. It's a balance, like you say, it's a balance of speed of change and impact at scale, isn't it? And you're getting that intersection between the two of them and getting that right, you can do amazingly fast, innovative things that have such a huge impact for so many people. I've back to the kind of consultancy side of things, I kind of made a conscious decision at some point to focus on the things that you've built rather than, because I having worked at a big management consultancy, I so many lovely PowerPoints, so many lovely PDFs, but when you're kind of 30 years from now, when you're thinking about doing something else, I don't think you're going to be talking about those PowerPoints, are you? It's the lives you've changed.
Totally. I think when I think about the things that I'm most proud of, it's company. When I think about the number of people that are employed, for instance, by companies that I helped start, and the lives people's lives who have become fantastically successful financially on the back of that. It's those types of things that really matter to me. If I just go back though to what you said before about sort of the PowerPoints and that side, I think there's a real, I don't know if it's an irony or jumping off point when it comes to innovation in large institutions, because I'm very much in favor of building in public, to your sort of point of get it in the hands of customers, do those things. But what, I think, or what's I've found to be successful is that you build in public when it comes to your customers and you build in private when it comes to the rest of your organization. And it's a very different way to think about things.
Sure. Yeah, and talk a little bit about the difference there, because obviously when the private part of that is about making sure you're getting alignment, that you're getting the momentum, that the culture shift is, because there's things that you're happy to admit publicly and there's things that you're not. And it's like a family, right? Actually culture change is difficult and it's often, messy. So, doing that privately makes total sense, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's 2 points to it that I've, sort of developed over time. So one is large institutions, and particularly regulated financial institutions, for very good reasons, have immune systems. And those immune systems are against change, just like the immune system in my own body. And so that means that if you don't want the antibodies coming to prevent your change and keeping you on the path, you need to do things to inoculate yourself from that. So it's one is sort of understanding the immune response of the organization that you're in, trying not to prompt that immune response. That's one part. I think the other part, and this one took me a long time, at large places, and this is true across different industries, and to an extent at smaller companies too, but I've found it more at large companies. There's people who are excellent at ideation and coming up with the idea, where you should go, how to think about it. There's people who you need for execution, and they're great at execution. And then there's people who have the ability to say yes, which I contrast from people who have the ability to say no. Sure. And very rarely are those three gifts in the same human. And so the point of building in private, it's very much also around making sure that you're going to the right people at the right time. There's tons of people who will be curious, who want to give you their ideas, but ultimately, if they can't say yes, if they can't execute, and if they're not the idea people, they might actually just be a no person. And for now, focus on the yes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Having got that wrong, working at a big bank in the UK you learn that quite quickly, don't you? In terms of the route in order to achieve things, in order to make things happen, don't you? And then it almost the breaking of that mold then becomes the new process. It becomes the path, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think one of the pieces of advice that I give to founders today, trying to work with big banks, is or large institutions in general. You should be asking people, who has the ability to make this decision? Do you have the ability to make this decision? And sometimes it can be uncomfortable if you're having a great conversation, people are taking meeting after meeting. Who needs to sign the contract? Who needs to say yes? What is that critical path? And being very clear on what that is.
Yeah. So I guess in that, I've definitely seen this. I've seen great ideas sort of stop, or great projects stop because that hasn't been followed. You must have seen that in your career as well.
Yeah, I've seen it many times. And
it's hard, isn't it? Because you feel almost helpless to that change, even though the idea is great, or it's not what they've done, it's the way that they've approached it, which has meant it's failed.
Yeah, well, and I think also, I find it very hard to understand the difference between politeness and interest versus accountability.
Sure.
And so for me at least, unless I ask, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always interesting. So how can you help us make this happen is always an interesting ending point to it, isn't it? But obviously that transition from the US to the UK as well, have you found a difference in people's, you say about the slightly odd British politeness sometimes that we have in these situations, but, having worked internationally, those cultural differences is often quite an interesting learning curve as well.
Yeah, I've chosen to work here for a long time now. I find I love living here. I think we've got the benefit of time zones that I sort of talked about a little bit before, obviously rule of law, but importantly, if we think about the largest capital markets in the world, if we're just focused on fintech, this is a place to be. Fintech is by far the largest sector in the UK innovation economy. It means that when you talk to some of the brightest people in venture, in innovation, they will also have a sort of second specialty, if not a primary specialty, in fintech. So for me, this is an awesome place to be.
Yeah. And I guess stepping out of one large organization to one even larger at that stage, HSBC, how did you prepare for that in terms of, we talk about learning the culture, learning the processes. How did you approach that? It's like dating, isn't it? You got to kind of figure out all of the weird and the wonderful to know whether that's a long-term thing, right?
Yeah, it's a good analogy. I haven't thought of that one before. But so I knew the previous CEO very well, and she was actually the one who called me about the job, Erin Platts, who is exceptional. And so we actually spent a lot of time talking about the culture, talking about the fit, and importantly, where is their heritage to build on, and where are things to keep going with, or to think in a different way. And I didn't, not by design, but you mentioned before sort of regulatory approval. So I'm in a role that required regulatory approval, which meant that I was in the door working with the team, with everyone knowing that I was going to be CEO for a number of weeks from the end of February until early June, without the actual role.
That always feels like a weird process, doesn't it? Like I feel like there should be some sort of process with a sword where you're appointed at the end of it or something,
It needed some sort of something at the end, but also along the way, it was sort of like, am I an intern? Am I, what do I do? No authority. And what I hadn't realized was it was a great opportunity. So it forced me in a way that I was trying to, but it forced me in a way to slow down
Sure.
on decision making, some of those things, because I wasn't in a position to do those. And then also really get to know people as individuals. It was a great forcing mechanism. So anyone who's doing a large change, if you've got that time to spend with the team to see it operate, but where you actually can't make decisions and you take more time to understand the context and those types of things, it's very valuable.
Yeah, you often get a greater on-ramp there than just, okay, what's the 5 things we need to solve for in terms of moving stuff forward? Yeah, I mean, that is good. And like I say, getting used to or getting ready for that level of change. And have you noticed since you were not quite the sword ceremony, but the point where the regulator is happy and they've done all the checks they need to, have you felt a change at that point as well?
Well, so I mean, we don't really have sword ceremonies or swords in the office overall. I should probably be clear on that.
Okay, I think the regulator would frown upon that actually, but
I think they would. We do use gongs when we win deals, so
Right.
you do hear the sound of gongs pretty regularly.
Like that.
But I think I joined this business as a scale up, right? I mean, we are a large. When I think about sort of in the context of our clients, we have product market fit, we have scale. We have real competitive advantages. And the question is, how do we then go from here? And what does that sort of next phase of growth look like?
Very good. And actually, we'll talk about that in part 2. So that is it for part 1. But stick around, because what we're going to be doing is warming up a little bit more on actually what it is that Emily's vision is for HSBC Innovation Banking in the UK. More broadly, what the UK scene is really doing now, because there's been some interesting shifts and changes in the market, and really where she sees the next big opportunities and risks are coming from. So buckle up, guys. We'll be back with you in a second. Hey folks, if you're anything like us, you're on the road constantly. Airports, hotels, conference centres, half the time the Wi-Fi feels as safe as shouting, "My PIN is 1234" across the departures lounge. That's where NordVPN comes in. One click or no clicks with AutoConnect. And suddenly, every sketchy airport network becomes a whole lot safer. You still get blazing fast speeds and 8,700 servers in 129 countries. So you can switch your virtual location while you're waiting for yet another delayed flight. One account covers 10 devices, and you get Threat Protection Pro to block malicious links and ads, plus Dark Web Monitor if your details show up where they shouldn't. We've teamed up with them to offer Fintech Insider fans an exclusive deal. Head to nordvpn.com/fintechinsider to get a huge discount and 4 extra months on top, completely risk-free with their 30-day money-back guarantee. Links in the description.
As a chef, I know flavor doesn't begin in the kitchen. It begins on the land. And Westhome's nature-led Australian Wagyu is a story written in the landscape of Northern Australia. Cooking is storytelling, and Westhome Wagyu carries a story of Northern Australia itself. Raw, powerful, and deeply authentic. It's a testament to the passion and care raised in the rhythm of Northern Australia. I'm Chef Maylin from 88 Club in Los Angeles, and I invite you to visit westhome.com/Maylin to learn more. And taste a story only Westhome nature-led Australian Wagyu can tell. That's westhome.com/MEILIN.
Hey folks, welcome back. We're going to be switching gears and looking ahead in this part of the show. We're going to be diving into Emily Turner's vision for HSBC Innovation Banking, the UK fintech ecosystem, and where she sees the next big opportunities and the biggest challenges really coming from. I mean, you touched on it a little bit before the break, but I mean, HSBC Banking UK, I mean, you guys have got a very unique proposition for the market. I've never really sort of talked to a company where the structure of knowing people's businesses is more of a focus, and that's amazing to see. So that DNA, as you sort of referred to it, feels like it goes all the way back to the origins of the business, which I always kind of think with any financial services business, there was a really clear purpose when it was started, but it feels like that's as strong as ever. Talk to me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've got the best job in HSBC and arguably, in the city and financial services here. And it's exactly what you said. It's that I work at a business that's purpose-built around our clients front to back with specialization all the way through, and where we're not, yes, we are there to deliver lending products and transaction banking and all of those things and with distinction. But ultimately, what everyone comes in every day is for their clients to succeed. And, even in some of my portfolio companies before, I would feel bits of this, but you feel this front to back of the entire business. And it's an extraordinary place.
Well, and talk about that difference a little bit more, because obviously when you think about SME banking, often the banks are experts in banking, but they're not experts in people's businesses. So tell me a little bit more, because when it was first announced that you were going to take this role, I was like, that makes total sense. Because given your background and you've done a little bit of all of the bits to make those you talked about empathy earlier on. You can be deeply empathetic to the problems that you're facing when you're running a business, right?
Yeah, I think so. So let me bring it to life in one way, and then I'll come back to your question. So, when I'm asked by, be it a policymaker, a government official, anyone, and we spend a lot of time in that space about what's going on, I'm never talking about banking regulation, what's in it for us. It's all about our clients. What do they need? What do they need to be successful? And specifically what I mean is, what does it take for people to be able to start companies, scale companies, exit companies in this country, right? That is what I mean, pretty simplistically. And then I'll see, of course, and given they're our clients as well, what does it mean for the investors in those companies to be successful? And, so I think we have a really prized and privileged position, and I don't take that for granted. And one part of that comes from the history, the DNA, the culture of the business. And, for those that don't know us, we effectively have three segments of the market that we cover. So one is we cover technology companies, two, we cover life sciences companies, and three, we cover investors in the innovation economy. And so who are investing in tech, life sciences, and beyond. So that's all we do. And like so many great companies, I think that by focusing on what we do, we can do that really well. But also by having scale, we see parts of the market that no one else can, and then have insights around that. And so, and it's been, a learning journey for me as I get to know the business, but also, talking to clients, talking to key stakeholders in the market, talking to other colleagues at HSBC. What we have, I think, one part that's very different for us is we do a significant amount of convening. And what I mean by that is, how do we help our clients put their hand on the scales if it's around regulation or regulatory friction, around access to talent, these types of things? How do we make sure that we do those? And so we only know that by not just saying, help us understand, your working capital needs or, your inventory turns, but really, what do you need for your company? What do you need to go to market? So we spend a lot of time, for instance, with founder success and investor success and these types of things, which you wouldn't think of in a normal bank.
Yeah, and that feels almost like it's, we often talk about the difference between sort of products and services. You guys are a service business in that regard, in terms of the community and everything that you curate around that. It isn't just about financial instruments and giving somebody a financial product. It's the experience of being with you in that way. As far as you say you only do three things. You pick the three really interesting things, right? As far as any economy anywhere, they're the things that are fundamentally changing how the environment or the society works, aren't they? So that's a pretty fun specialism to have.
It is. I'm very lucky to be able to spend my days and be paid to spend my days with people who have already changed the world, and who today want to change the world more, and tomorrow want to change it even more after that. It's a very awesome place.
And as you say, the UK market is shifting, every day, right? Where there's something new happening, or there's regulatory changes, or as you say, there's sort of strains and stresses in various different ways. That's an exciting thing, but also an interesting sort of threat, I guess, for your customers. So you guys staying ahead of that curve. Like you say, you've got the almost the obligation to continue that learning process, which is an amazing thing, isn't it?
Yeah, and our aim is very much to be lockstep with our clients as they grow, as they scale, as they have various opportunities and challenges. And certainly being part of HSBC now, we can go global with them in a way that no other bank can.
And I guess to that point on the scaling bit, what are the challenges that you're particularly seeing for entrepreneurs that are growing those businesses, or businesses that are growing today?
Yeah, so I think I largely don't think this is fintech specific, but if I just speak to sort of startups and scale-ups across the UK and beyond, it's so first of all, it's access to capital. Second, it's access to talent. Third, it's access to customers, and procurement is a big issue. But ultimately, this is a very fast-changing world and an area of, by design, high risk. And so it's being a founder is a hard job.
Definitely. With 10 years under my belt at 11FS, I can definitely say it's a hard job, because it's the point you make on talent. Talent is everything, right? If you can get those things right, you seem to sort of overcome most other challenges to a certain degree. But you never know until you know, though, on that one. So, I guess, have you seen any particular differences, obviously having worked in other geographies as well, to here? Because I've always sort of found with, we did bizarrely, you talk about the financial crisis, we did a documentary talking about what happened since '08 here. And actually, the M25 is a weird moat. We've got the regulators, and we've got the Bank of England, and we've got all of the banks, and all of that ecosystem inside the M25 is quite rare. So UK seems like quite an interesting petri dish for fintech.
I think it is. And it's interesting you make the M25 analogy, because one of the things we've seen over the last few years in fintech and beyond is the growth outside of the M25. And so when we think about fintech in the UK, it is a London story, but you need to think about Cardiff, increasingly Manchester, Edinburgh, because there's an ability to innovate in all of these places. And, I think that's also very exciting. Yeah,
I'm trying to fly the flag for Norfolk fintech, but it's not catching it on, I'll be honest with you. It's nobody wants that commute, so unfortunately. And in that ecosystem is the sort of collaboration between big incumbent organizations and startups. That's always an interesting sort of threat or opportunity sort of dynamic. How do you see that balance working? And you've sort of seen it being fostered on either side of that equation, I guess.
Yeah. So, I think overall that's generally improving across, industries and geographies across the world as change is becoming more natural in many different places, and importantly, sort of historically not built here type of biases and things like that. We are seeing that erode in a very positive way, in my view. But if I take it just to sort of my own lived experience at HSBC Innovation Banking UK, so we have one company, Atler, who's one of our clients. If you don't know them, they're in the sort of modern treasury management space. We could see that many of our other clients were working with Atler. And so because of the vantage point we're in with such a large portion of the market, but also, to your point, going beyond traditional financial services, what are the problems you're solving? Many of our clients are trying to solve for getting their their engineering resources focused on their core business versus, say, building their financial infrastructure. And how do we optimize that time? Well, if you can work with a API-first treasury management system, you can deliver that plus a sort of distinctive experience and capability. Now we actually directly integrate and have joint clients that we go to market with. So I think, that's just one example where we're able to see where our clients going, what are they talking about as their problems, how can we deliver that in a new way?
Yeah, it's a balancing act at that stage, isn't it? Because you're how do you stay innovative and make things happen and balance risk and balance the sort of operational side of things as well. It's goes back a little bit to what we said. It's everything would be easy if nobody had any customers, and the minute you've got loads of customers and loads of data, then actually the controls around those things are really, really important, aren't they?
Indeed. Trust is a prerequisite and super important in this job.
Yeah. I guess as CEO, that must change the dynamic slightly, for you as well. I know obviously in other things that you've done, you've been the person in charge, you've been running it, but the title is slightly, well, the regulator doesn't get involved in other titles, do they? So how have you found that change, and have you enjoyed that sort of transition?
Yeah, I think from a career perspective, it was always something that I had in mind of sort of, should I, could I, and it's been great. I like to think I thrive in feeling accountable. It's, ultimately for me down to the people. And if people in my team can succeed, I feel like I've succeeded. And the title just emphasizes that.
And I know it's something we've talked about before off the pod, but how do you sort of measure success in that? Because I know, when you had that time sort of on that on-ramp, it was something that you gave a lot of thought to, because, often, the spreadsheets aren't the only sign of it. And back to my point earlier on, it's not going to be the spreadsheet or the PowerPoint that you look back on. So how are you going to measure your success with this role?
Yeah, so I mean, I think
feels like a performance management appraisal suddenly, doesn't it? I didn't mean it to sound like that.
It is that time of year. So I think ultimately for us, our aim is to be the undisputed leader, commercial bank for the innovation economy in this market. And so one part of that is very much alpha. So how do we deliver distinctive products and services, and with an emphasis on services, to your point? But also, we very much want to put our hands on the scales for this market to grow. And so that's another part of it, but it's all of that. I'd like to, today the UK is the third largest venture market in the world, behind China and the US, but with a lot of room to grow. How do we continue to close that gap and make it easier, better, faster as a place for capital, but also for a place for entrepreneurs and doers? Yeah.
And that's, that approach has a fundamental impact on the culture of the type of organization that you're running as well, right? Because people get out of bed for a very different reason than just, not just a happy customer, but you're talking there about the customers of your customers, and scale that up, and it has an impact on GDP of countries, which is that's a pretty cool thing to do. Right?
Yeah, no, I mean it's meeting people who have ambitions to change the GDP of where they live, and importantly, change lives, not just the people that work for them, but sort of customers. It's awesome.
Very cool. So you've got your feet under the table now. You've been given the approval. Where do you see the next 3 to 5 years going then? There's a lot of change, isn't there, in the technology space? There's lots of regulatory changes. There's government changes and all sorts of stuff. So how do you think this? How's it all going to pan out?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm an optimist, as I said before. And, so I think that this market is going to continue to grow. I think that we're going to see that across all, stages of growth. I think what we saw from Revolut, last year, but, we will, there's a lot of very highly valued fintechs and growth to come here. So for me, this is about continuing to deliver on that value proposition of being a great banking partner, but also pushing the market overall. And then I think it's a question of, how do we encourage scaling cross-border? And as many businesses try to go cross-border, how do we be there for that?
Yeah. And I guess that brings a sort of a distinction between, innovation, you've got a dirty word for a long time, but there's sort of a balance there between things that are actually transformative, aren't they? Or just sort of nice little innovations. And how do you sort of, you in all of the roles that you've seen, you must have a lot of things come across your desk. So like Ready Reckoner, like what's your tell there?
Yeah. So, I think if I just take it back to us, so, HSBC bought a HSBC Innovation Banking coming up on 3 years ago. The transaction was, financially very lucrative just thereafter. And then since then, we've paid a few $100 million in dividends to our shareholder, and we've shown the strategic fit. On the back of that, confidence across HSBC has grown, as well as investment, and we're now in 10 markets. So you can see sort of the big changes there, which is not getting to your question, but I just sort of give that as sort of, you can see the pace of change, you can see the confidence, you can see the investment, and you can see the ROI on that. When I think about sort of transformative change versus not, I guess I struggle a little bit. Every $1 trillion business at some point was a $1 billion business. Every $1 billion business was a $1 million business. And so for me, it's about just that relentless pursuit of, delighting your customer, delivering something of value, and then continuing to challenge yourself for more.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say I've asked that question to a lot of different people, and actually when you sort of like Patrick Collinson or Bill at Standard Chartered, and the answer is quite similar, and people always think it's going to be something that there's like some sort of like how you make gold kind of moment, but actually it's exactly as you say. It is a, solve a problem for a customer, get the permission to solve the next one. And, hopefully you've done something that can scale to a level where you're really having an impact on people's lives. But it's interesting, the old saying of like common sense isn't that common. It feels like that sometimes. Huh?
Indeed. Behavior change is hard.
Very, very. And having, seen it for, many years, then I know we obviously always sort of say, digital banking is 1% finished, but it feels like this journey is so much more ahead of us than it is behind us, doesn't it?
Indeed. I think it's, we can see it more easily, I would say, in sort of the consumer fintech side. But on enterprise fintech, it doesn't even feel like we're 1% finished. I think we'd have to measure that in basis points.
100%, yeah. So I guess we talked a little bit earlier on around the sort of, it's not just what you're doing, it's the way that you do it. Something that I've always really enjoyed. You're a direct person, but you're very empathetic. And I always enjoy conversations that we've had in the past. Building that type of culture, being innovative, but asking, stupid questions out loud because they might not be stupid. Like, how do you sort of build that type of culture within an organization of that scale?
Yeah. I mean, I often talk about trying to be 51% right. And what I mean by that is in almost all of our jobs in financial services, you have imperfect information. And being so open, or my attempt to articulate that sort of 51% is to make it very acceptable to be wrong a lot of the time. And I think you just have to live it every day, So it's, saying things like, I'm going to start with a terrible idea because the aim is to make it better. Or I want to be 51% right. And I think you just continuously do those things and then celebrate as you get better.
Yeah. I mean, it's starting that end rather than I'm always right and, then being proved wrong it's a hard place to live in that, isn't it? But I think that's an interesting point from a leadership perspective as well, because you're creating the space for other people to be wrong, not just yourself, aren't you?
Yeah. And I mean, I think as long as you're clear on what your values are and that those are the red lines, we've talked about trust already here. Having the trust of our clients is the most important thing. That's, anything that would erode that trust are things that you need to surface. And then there's a lot of degrees of freedom within that.
Yeah. And then it's a behaviors conversation more than anything else, isn't it? So I guess we're going to rapidly run out of time. So like as the months and quarters go by, you'll definitely have to come back and talk to us more about the progress you're making and the things that you're seeing in the market. But I guess to wrap us up, is there sort of one piece of advice or one thing you've seen in your career that would stand out that you would give to founders or innovators or somebody who's struggling in a bank now and is like, how do I start making the scale of change you've done? What would be the advice you'd give to people?
I'm a big fan of work joy. And what I mean by that is, I'll speak for myself, but I know it's true of so many people. We spend more of our waking hours at work with people we work with than a lot of other things in our life. So if you don't get a pretty good balance of trade on joy from that, it's not worth it. And so as opposed to thinking about sort of what are the things that, get you more successful, make you more money, think about the things that make you happy and then focus on those.
Yeah, that's great because it's if you've got to put the amount of effort in that you do, you've got to love doing it, haven't you? It's going to feel like work, unfortunately, isn't it?
But it starts to feel less hard.
Yeah,
if you love it.
Definitely. I completely agree with that. All right, we are going to have to wrap up today's discussion though. So a massive thank you, Emily, for coming in and joining us in the studio today. Where can people learn a little bit more about you and all the great work you're doing?
So you can find us on our website or on LinkedIn, and then also, if you're in the innovation economy, chances are you'll see us in an event or around town, but any of those work.
Very good. As for me, you can always find me mostly lurking on LinkedIn these days. So thank you so much for listening, everybody. If you like what you heard, follow the podcast and don't forget to leave us a review. It helps us make it better and helps other people find the show as well. As always, if you want to join in the conversation, you can find us on pretty much every social media channel. Just search for 11FS or Fintech Insider. Or if you really fancy it, email us on podcasts@11fs.com. Thank you very much for listening, everybody. Goodbye.